It's Thursday, the 3rd of October, 2024. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 stories, 5 minutes. Let's go. Story number 1, annual rent increases for houses have hit multi-year lows in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide, suggesting, Sean, that the rental boom is over.
Finally, some good news for renters following the steepest and longest rental surge in history, according to Domain's rent report released this morning. For the first time in 9 months, quarterly rental growth for both houses and units has stalled across the combined capitals, marking the weakest September quarter since 2019 for houses and 2020 for units. Annual gains are now at an almost 3-year low. Over the September quarter, Sydney's rental growth rate for houses was its lowest in 4 years, though the median weekly rent is still $775, fairly high. They were steady for units at $720. In Melbourne, there was no growth in the last quarter for houses at $580, units $550. In the house rental market, Brisbane went backwards. Perth was the strongest performer. All capital cities in the house market are more expensive than Melbourne, except for Hobart. Clearly, rental demand is easing, with the number of prospective tenants per rental listing on Domain falling to its lowest level since 2019.
So there's finally some good news for renters then, Sean.
Yes, but there's always a but, isn't there? Domain says that despite the slowdown in rental growth, tenants are still paying record high asking rents across all capitals except Brisbane and Canberra. All capital cities remain firmly a landlord's market, with vacancy rates below 2%. Now, that means it's quite an unusual environment for rent growth to stall or decline. However, with house rents up 48% since March 2020, units are up 40%, affordability is clearly a factor that keeps putting downward pressure on rents.
All right, moving on to story number 2 now, Sean. And if you're looking for a special dividend, maybe Rio Tinto, REA, JB Hi-Fi, Mineral Resources and Ramsay Healthcare are good places to start.
That's according to investment bank Morgan Stanley, which has compiled a list of companies with excess franking credit balances per share. The most efficient way to get franking credits into investors' pockets is by special dividends, and are paid out at the discretion of boards. Of course, a company may have franking credits, but not the cash to pay out the dividends, or they may use the cash to buy other assets. Morgan Stanley strategists expect companies to increasingly pay out special dividends going forward, which are in excess of the half and full year payouts.
Story number 3, a new list of approved and banned items will kick in today for the NDIS, and sex work, tarot card reading, yoga classes and cuddle therapy are out.
The 1-year transition period for people living with a disability starts today as part of the federal government's efforts to reduce the fast rising cost of the scheme. Approved items include assistance animals, mobility supports, transport costs, help for some household tasks, behavioural supports, prosthesis, nursing care, and modifications to the home and specialist vehicles. Items no longer allowed include accommodation costs, groceries, cigarettes, vapes, illegal drugs, technology products not directly related to disability care, clothing and beauty products, pet costs, wellness services, firearms, and airline lounge memberships, as well, of course, Michael, as the ones you mentioned.
Story number 4, the boss of Country Road Group has conceded the retailer has suffered its worst financial performance in its history.
And that will trigger a rethink of its structure, potentially new leadership teams, and probably cost-cutting, which will likely lead to job losses. Country Road Group will restructure its sourcing and supply chain while also looking for better pricing deals with suppliers, according to a report in The Australian. In an address to Country Road Group staff at its Melbourne headquarters yesterday, Chief Executive Raju Vippalapati said recent staff surveys were confronting and show a sharp fall in staff morale. Mr. Vippalapati said Country Road Group, whose brands include Country Road, Trenery, Mimco, Witchery and Politics, has experienced a perfect storm of economic challenges. He also acknowledged that internal workplace issues had played a part.
Last one, Sean. Story number 5. What do you make of this one? Vintage shopping in the US is booming, with sales at 7 times the pace of the broader retail industry. In fact, it is so big that some of the big retailers are jumping on board.
Vintage shopping, to those of us that have been around, is also known as buying second-hand clothing. Not my cup of tea, Michael. Anyway, it is plenty of people's cups of tea. Apparently, the new vintage clothing stores are a little more upmarket than St Vincent de Paul or thrift shops. Retail giants including Banana Republic, Madewell and H&M are getting into the resale game, according to a report in the New York Times. Others, such as Lululemon, J.Crew and Abercrombie & Fitch, use third parties to resell their clothing. Reselling sports clothing from Lululemon, not my cup of tea. There are now about 25,000 resale stores in the US, and while many have an online presence, it's vintage shopping, bricks and mortar. People go and like to check out the clothes rather than buying them online.
I just love that you are so happy just to come out and just declare that, no, I am not doing this.
That's not me.
No, not you indeed. All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Thursday, the 3rd of October, 2024. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. And if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed, wherever you listen to podcasts. And every Thursday, there's a new episode of our property podcast called The Property Pendulum, brought to you by Fear and Greed and Domain. It is this week all about renovating. How much should you spend on renovations to avoid overcapitalising? It is a really interesting topic. I'll put a link in today's show notes. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.